Hey guys, Chris here from Lifeline EMS Training. We've had a couple requests for the basics of ECGs. Hey, I hooked the patient up to the monitor. What are some rhythms or ECGs I should stop somebody in their assessment to let them know that it's concerning or something I want them to lay eyes on? Well, typical fashion, we're going to break things down, but we're going to break it down into two parts. So the second part of this series will be that. The first part will be the normal squiggle. So what is good and how good happens. So we're talking about cardiac conduction here. So as a reminder, impulses start here at the SA node, go down the interatrial pathways. So over to the left atrium, down to the AV node, which is our slowing resistor. So it's what allows for asynchronous contraction between the atria and the ventricle. And then comes out of there through the junction to the left and right bundles, anterior posterior fascicle on the left side, right bundle on the right side, and then depolarizes the ventricles. So it's a top right, down, essentially bottom left delivery or vector of energy. So going back through the basic squiggles here, we have our P wave, which how does that P wave happen? Well, first off, the SA node, which is very minuscule in the terms of energy, triggers its initial impulse, which creates the rippling effects. The SA node fires, which happens right here, and that firing goes down those interatrial pathways like you talked about. And those interatrial pathways and the atrial depolarization is what makes up your P wave, or the first positive inflection, right? So this P wave actually is kind of broken up into two parts, and that's that atrial septum right there. So the first half is essentially the right atria depolarizing, second half is left atria depolarizing. One day when we get time, we'll do another video on advanced ECG stuff, but you'll not uncommon to see notched or one side bigger than the other side P waves, and that's just because the person has enlargement on one of those atria, whether it's the left or the right. Could be engorged from being overfilled by too much volume, could be enlarged because the muscle has gotten bigger over time to compensate. But this positive inflection here is your P wave. It's atrial depolarization. The SA node fires right here, creates that ripple effect to the atria, and sends a signal down to the AV node. So over and down. So after we get that SA node firing to get the atrial depolarization, we want that AV node to hold the signal for a little bit. We want it to hold it for less than 0.2 seconds. And we've actually picked in this picture a first degree heart blocker, one where this PR interval is longer than 0.2 seconds. This purple line right here would be 0.2 seconds. So if I saw here to here would be greater than 0.2 seconds, that tells me this person has a first degree heart blocker, extended delay in the AV node of holding that signal. But the job here is the AV node holding that signal to get that asynchronous depolarization. It's really the thing that allows our heart to have cardiac output. The top goes poof, depolarizes, contracts, sends blood volume to the ventricles. The delay comes through, the ventricles depolarize, and poof, they contract, ejecting blood out to the lungs and to the body. So this is our PR segment right here, and that's the AV nodal delay time. The longer that is, the more the AV node holds the signal. And we'll talk about the two sides of the AV node here in 1 second. But if you see somebody who has this part right here that gets longer and longer and longer and then drops, that's an AV nodal problem, also called a second degree type 1 block. So here's a zoom in of your AV node. It's actually to scale. This is exactly what it looks like with stop gates in there. Well, there's like a Jersey barrier in the middle or a wall in the middle, and there's a fast side where the signal goes down very fast and the slow side. And really what it equates to is this side is more sympathetically influenced than this side is more parasympathetically influenced. So the more acetylcholine or parasympathetic influence happening in your heart, the slow side becomes the side that is more active and takes the signal. If you're more adrenaline dumping, sympathomimetic, you're on some type of stimulant, you're amped up because you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, your signal's going down the fast side. The fast side still has a delay to it, so it still allows for that asynchronous atrial and ventricular depolarization. And then you have these gates at the top. So the signals come in, these gates open, signal goes, holds or bounds down the slow side or goes through the fast side. And then the bottom gate opens, comes out the junction right here. Once it comes out the junction, then it goes down to the ventricles. Now this QRS right here, this is the QRS. QRS depolarizes, and that's the ventricles, the electrical impulse causing depolarization. So that's a positive inflection. You want this narrow or less than 0.12 seconds or 3 little blocks. It tells you have good high velocity through that large surface area. After the ventricles depolarize, you need to recharge them, right? So then you get this is called the T wave. T wave is ventricular repolarization. You might ask yourself, well, why do we see ventricular depolarization and repolarization, but over here we only see atrial depolarization and we don't see atrial repolarization? Well, the atria repolarizing happens around the same time that the ventricles are depolarizing, and because the energy amplitude is much larger in the ventricular depolarization, atrial repolarization or recharging gets masked behind the energy of the depolarization of the ventricles, but it's actually happening. As a gee whiz thing, why is this positive up here? So anytime the signal is coming down the normal vector, it's positive. So the ripple or the wave is positive. Anytime you see it going negative or under this line right here called the isoelectric line, it's going against the gradient. So it's going against the normal vector of energy. This, you would think, okay, well, ventricles depolarize, and then they should repolarize. Whoop. They don't actually do that. They actually depolarize and then repolarize down the same path they do polarized. Why? Well, because if a rogue impulse came down range and triggered them, if they were repolarizing from the bottom back up, they may not have recharged enough to trigger a good contraction, and they're vulnerable to VFib or arrest. So it's elastic repolarization, or it starts back at the point where it depolarized and then goes back down. That's why they're positive, because they're recharging down the normal vector of energy. So anything that goes down that normal vector, that normal flow, it's like a Formula One car. It's designed to be very efficient. So it goes down, SA node fires, boop, you get the atrial depolarization with your P wave. Signal goes down, gets held up either in the slow or the fast side of the AV node, causes that PR segment, that delay, and then it goes down the junction through the ventricles for depolarization. Nice narrow QRS. The QRS is wide. That tells us it's from the bottom, most likely from the bottom. And that's because if this little heart cell here, or this little cluster here, or this little cluster here in the ventricles starts firing, going rogue, becoming pissed off, ischemic, irritable, and it starts generating their own automaticity or their automatic impulses, and they're making now VTAC and they're taking over, they're going against that normal vector. So they're an absolute right axis. So they're going against the normal flow. So it's like swimming up Niagara Falls or swimming up creek or off-roading on a back road. It's not efficient, so it takes more time. And when it takes more time, that's what this line is here. The horizontal line on the EKG is time. The vertical line is amplitude or energy. So if it takes more time, your QRS is going to be wider. Your depolarization is going to be less efficient because you're going against the normal flow or vector of energy. So it's like swimming up creek. So what does a normal one look like? Yeah, so the monitor pops up here. We have our P wave, right? So it lets us know our signal is coming from the atria. So we have our atrial depolarization. A P wave is associated with this QRS, which is narrow. So we have a good normal vector ventricular depolarization that's followed by a P wave atrial depolarization. So we have a good, nice sinus rhythm here because it's coming, the SA node or the sinus node, sinoatrial node is the one that's triggering that impulse. So we have a sinus rhythm, QRS, good positive T wave, and our rate is between 60 to 100 in adults. So this is a sinus rhythm. This is a normal rhythm. We want these little bumps to be before these tall spikes. So that way we know the atria signal is what's triggering the ventricular signal. That's a good thing. And an OG whiz thing, anytime you see the squiggles up here and you're feeling for a pulse, your eye should go right down to these pulse ox pleths. When you see this pulse ox pleth here, this should be associated with this. This lets you know you have pulsatile or mechanical function of the heart. So it has enough mechanical function to generate cardiac output or a pulse out to the wherever this probe is, probably in the finger, the farthest point from the body. Unlike this, where we see these beats, these are wide, right? What do we say about wide beats? Going against the gradient. So these would be called premature ventricular contractions, or you'll commonly hear people say PVCs. These are excited beats that are outside the normal conduction that are firing prematurely or not within or ahead of the normal conduction cycle. And these may or may not perfuse. In this instance, these do not have a pleth with them, so they're not perfusing. That's a problem because then this number is not accurate. This is electrical impulse pulse rate. It also needs to correlate with SpO2 pleth pulse rate. So here's our other normal beats. We have our P wave, so our atrial impulse associated with our narrow QRS. So we have atria sending the signal to the ventricles down the normal vector, nice and efficient. Ventricles are repolarizing, everything's good. And then we get these two rogue ventricular beats in this instance because they're wide, coming from the bottom, inefficient, and they're not perfusing. That's a problem. This is a state of lack of blood flow right here when you see this flatline pulse ox plot. So that's a quick review on EKG Basics 2.0 for the EMT EMR for when you hook up the patient and, what's going on? So that's a basic review of the things of what's going on and what normal is or good should be. As always, if you have any questions, hit us up at info@lifelineemstraining.com, and we hope you have a great day.